Glenn, hello.
Hello, Michael. How are you?
I'm very well indeed. So, for those who don't know Glen Alleman, I think of him as the project manager's project manager. He has such a depth of experience, particularly in large-scale, complex projects in the government and defense sectors. He is someone I am constantly learning from. And he's also outspoken on many aspects of the profession. But unlike so many voices, Glenn is astonishingly well read and thoughtful. His rigorous approach shows project management at its absolute best. His book, Performance-Based Project Management, is one of the best that there is at its tier. It's, I would say, a kind of second tier book. It's not a beginner's book, but it is readable by beginners, but it will take you that step further. And so I was really excited when he turned to risk management for his second book, which he wrote with co-author Jon Quigley. It combines Glenn's characteristic rigor with his brilliant clarity of thinking. And that's why I wanted to speak with you today, Glenn, about mastering project risk. So, Glenn, welcome.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
I like that you spend a lot of pages in this book ensuring that your readers understand the fundamental issues that underpin risk management. I think we kind of quite often rush to explain a 2x2 matrix without thinking about what it actually means. And one of the key ideas you discuss is the distinction between three types of risk. And they've all got names that won't be familiar to a lot of our listeners: aleatory risk, epistemic risk, and ontological risk. So these are unfamiliar words, but I think the distinctions are really important, not just to the way that you have written the book, but to how we should be thinking about understanding and managing the risks on our projects. So can you put these into some simple terms and tell us what these terms mean and why you consider the distinction so important?
Okay, well, let's start with the epistemic risk. So epistemology is the study of knowledge. So an epistemic risk is I didn't know, and I can spend money to know. I can buy that information. I can buy that knowledge by building prototypes or running experiments or reading a book and or reading a journal paper about somebody who's done this before. So that risk is actually reducible by spending effort, time, funding, and therefore that work to do that needs to be in the schedule. Yeah, I need to buy down the risk. And then aleatory risk is an alea, A-L-E-A, is a single die that the Greeks gambled with. Aleatory risk, the weather is an aleatory risk. So unless you're a deity, and we work for a paving company, a road paving company, you're not going to prevent it from raining next week. So you have to have margin. Yeah. And what we do here in the States is you go to the Weather Bureau, the National Oceanic Administration, which is here in Boulder, Colorado, and you look up the probability of rain next week. And if it's 0, then in our schedule, we can do the asphalt paving. If it's not 0, we need margin. Yeah. And then what ontological risks are is that we use this word all the time, unknown unknowns. It may be unknowable. And the quick little story is when we went to Iraq long ago and made some big mistakes there, those people claimed that they were unknown unknowns, ontological uncertainties.
The Donald Rumsfeld statement.
But on the shelf here is a book written by Herodotus in 540 BC titled The Histories, where he told Alexander the Great, do not go there. So those people didn't read that book and they went there. But they claimed, it was unknowable. That's because they didn't read the history books. And the only person that ever conquered that part of the world was Genghis Khan, and he had to kill everybody on the way there and on the way out. So the claim of ontological uncertainties is slightly, false. Did you do your homework? Did you actually go to and study every epistemic uncertainty and every aleatory uncertainty? And if you did, you could probably still claim there might be some ontological things like unknown unknowns. Okay, fine.
And I think it came into the news, didn't it? Because of the debate about whether COVID was, in your terms, aleatory, epistemic, or ontological. A lot of people said, well, it came out of nowhere. Nobody could have predicted it. The fact is, lots of people did predict it. It wasn't just that we hadn't necessarily done our research, which would have made it an epistemic risk. The fact is, we might not have known that it was going to be this particular virus, but statistically, we were pretty much due for a pandemic, and they will come. We just don't have enough research to know what frequency and how to spot them further in advance.
Yes. And our son is a molecular biologist at the University of Idaho, and the only purpose of an entity that kills its host is population control. Yeah. So he goes, these viruses will come. There's too many people on this planet. It's called evolutionary biology. And if you were paying attention in that class, you would know this too. So,
and I think your weather example is a nice one, because my understanding of aleatory risk is it is purely probabilistic.
Yes.
You know it can happen, and if you've done your research, you might even know the likelihood that it will happen within a time frame. But what you can never know is when it will happen. And I think the weather is something where it moves from a purely aleatory risk. If you're planning to do your paving as part of building a complex, and the paving stage is 3 years in advance, you have absolutely no idea what's going to happen on the scheduled day. As you get closer, you can start to buy down more and more certainty by investing in better and better forecasting.
Right, exactly. And the key here mathematically is that the aleatory uncertainties are not actually probabilistic, they're stochastic processes.
Yeah.
So
there's a term that our audience might not know, but you're a physicist, so explain that, please.
Yeah. So the stochastic processes are out of the control of human beings. So if I have a probabilistic process, there's a probability that our dog will run out onto the golf course if the kids leave the gate open. Yeah. Right? So I can fix that by putting a lock on the gate that only I have the key to. Yeah. So they can't leave the gate open and have the dog running around barking at the golfers. So weather is a stochastic process. Unless you're a deity, you're not going to stop the weather from happening. So that's the two differences. Now I can still model them mathematically, but one is controllable and one is not controllable. Yeah. So that's the key.
So we understand those differences, and as you say, you can model them, but a lot of people listening to this are going to be thinking, I'm not a mathematician. I don't want to be modeling these in great detail.
Right.
But these distinctions are important for day-to-day project managers. So how do we use this understanding to help us manage the variety of risks we might get on a typical project?
Well, the first thing we need to do is we need to write down what we understand at the moment to be the risks and their types of risks. Are they reducible or are they irreducible? And for the irreducible ones, I need margin. And if they're reducible, how much money do I need to reduce them? And then I need to make this what we would call a risk register. And there's lots of ways to do that. There's good ways and bad ways. The absolute best description of risk management with a risk register is done, and I'll send you the link, is our Department of Energy's risk management guide. And the risk register has probably 20 entities in it, and then all the plans, and it's easy to put it all in a spreadsheet. And then you assign the probability of occurrence, or you assign the stochastic behaviors, and then you do some calculations about what's the probability of showing up on time and on budget and having things work. So you have to have this risk management plan. So in that book is a quote from Tim Lister, who was the original program manager for the American Express charge card at IBM, and his quote is, we use all the time, is risk management is how adults manage projects. Yeah. So as a project manager, you are actually a risk manager at the end of the day, because you got cost and schedule and technical performance plus staffing plus everything else. And those are all uncertain. that you cannot have certainties, and you have to manage them in the presence of this uncertainty, and that's called risk management. And that's what good project managers do.
Yeah. I've liked that quote ever since I read it on your blog many years ago, and and it echoes the way that I think about projects that are going well. If you've planned well, you kind of know what should happen. So the thing to manage is the risks that the plan's wrong in all the many ways that it will be.
Right. And then ask yourself, even if I have a very good plan and it's all on baseline and it's going good, what's my plan B?
Yeah.
Because if there's something that walks in the door that I never heard of, I can't go back to the client or the astronaut or the spacecraft builder and say, well, we didn't think of that.
Yeah.
You paid us $10 billion to build the James Webb telescope. It has to work.
Yeah.
That's it. We're not hoping it's going to work. And most of that was built here in town, designed by Ball Aerospace. And I have a colleague down the road that designed it. And it has to work. It can't fail. So
yeah. And I think Plan B's, that contingency plan, is if there are true ontological risks, if there are risks that we cannot at least cost effectively reduce by research and investigation, then the only thing we can do is to have a contingency against something unknown happening.
Right. And I think I would say, Mike, that it's a lot of culture. And we live in a culture here in the Denver area where we're the second largest federal agency spot outside of DC. And it's all the aerospace companies are here and all the science companies are here. And for example, you can only fly to Mars in a 2-week window every 27 months.
Yeah.
Don't be late.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's the culture. If you're building the spacecraft at Lockheed and you're building the launch vehicles. So risk management is a culture that then is transformed into practices on program management.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's another word that I think people need to really embed in their psyche, is a lot of good project management practice is about the culture that the project leadership team, it's not one individual usually, create, and it's about, that's what leadership is. Now, another thing I particularly liked about your book is at the heart of the whole risk management approach is what you call a risk handling plan, which is a term I'd not actually come across. So could you explain what a risk handling plan is and how project professionals can create one?
Right. So if we acknowledge that all risks on the aleatory side are uncontrollable, an issue of deity, and on the epistemic side, I now need a plan. Well, on the aleatory side, my plan is what margin do I need? Yeah. And I need models. Usually they're Monte Carlo simulations that would tell me how much margin I need. And in our federal world, that's mandated. You must submit that with your proposal, and you must submit that every month with the confidence. And on the epistemic side, I need to find out by my research, by gaining knowledge, what are the sources of this risk, and name them. And there's another thing that I want to convey to the project managers here, that root cause analysis is part of project management. So if I know that there's a problem, what is its root cause? And one of the best project programs I ever worked in my life was here in the Denver area. There was a nuclear weapons plant called Rocky Flats that was upwind from Denver. It was built in the 50s. It was originally planned to be downwind from Denver. But it was the second worst toxic waste site on the planet, and Chernobyl was number one. So I came to that site through a Navy captain that lives up the street, and the original program manager asked himself, Bob Card, when they're bidding the job, I need about 25 direct reports. I was not one; I was one level down. Who know how to get something done every single day for the next 7 years in exchange for $9 billion. Who are those people? And the answer is Navy ships captains. Yeah. Because, Mike, if you and I were on the ship and we're in the wardroom, there's the bulletin board that says plan of the day.
Yeah.
So what you ask yourself as a project manager, how long am I willing to wait before I find out I'm late or over budget or behind schedule or it doesn't work, and have a corrective action minimally at half that distance.
Yeah.
So the plan of the day is, I would ask, I was a program manager, I had about 20 project managers, and we were doing some of the IT infrastructure. We would have a talk at noon. How's it going?
Yeah.
And then we'd have a talk at 4:00. How's it going? And if it wasn't going well, then my next question was, what kind of pizza do you like? Because no one's leaving the site until we get our plan of the day done, because this project is lost one day at a time.
Yeah.
Now, that's a different world, but ask yourself, how long are you willing to wait before you find out you're late?
Yeah.
And make corrective actions at least at half that distance.
Yeah.
So if it's a month, then every 2 weeks, we have a status report for the new estimate to complete and the new estimate at completion for the cost, and then take corrective action. Do not wait until it happens. So, and you can raise children that way too. That's when you bring your raincoat with you if you think it's going to rain, and you close the gate so the dog does not escape. Everybody's a risk manager at the end of the day, from grade schoolers up to flying to Mars. We're all risk managers.
And actually, I think there's something important in that. It's very easy for people to say, well, yeah, but that was a huge project. That's not relevant. But my experience is that the best ideas get generated often on the huge projects where there's a lot of people putting a lot of thought to how do we solve problems that can then be brought in. And I like this idea of a plan for the day. How do we translate that then into a risk handling plan, an active plan for dealing with the risks that we face on our project?
Well, then on the project schedule with budget and staff, I need to identify the risk buy-down plan.
Okay.
So if I'm bending metal into a spacecraft or I'm pouring concrete for a building, where in the schedule with assigned resources, named resources, is the risk handling strategies, and who's responsible for defining them and checking them every week or every month or whatever, because it's part of the performance measurement baseline. Risk management is how adults manage projects, as Tim Lister would tell us. So it's a regular project management process. It's not separate. Some of the professional organizations would, and I won't name them, have it outside, and they have risk matrices, and they do math with them. You have a 5x5 matrix, and you number it 1 through 5, and then you do 2 times 6. Well, here's the problem. If you were paying attention in your high school calculus class, you would realize that that stochastic process, that is the aleatory risk, and the probabilistic process, which is the epistemic risk, are integral equations.
Yeah.
You cannot do arithmetic with them.
Yeah.
So I can't add one integral equation to another. So what we do is we have A through E as the rank, if you want to rank them, but you can't do math with them. You're not allowed to do the math. You have to go do the modeling, Monte Carlo simulations or other simulations. But think about these as so statistical or stochastic processes that are threatening the success of your project, and treat them approprially. They're not simply pictures to put on the wall with 1 through 5. And the successful risk managers know they have to make the launch date, or they have to make the opening date for the high rise, or they have to make the opening date for the highway, and they don't want to read about their name in the newspaper that it's late.
Yeah. And that brings us on to where I think your book really stands out against other books at the same or similar level of detail, including my own, actually. You have in here an excellent chapter on risk tracking.
Yes.
Because, and it's obvious, as soon as you think about it, that if you're not actually tracking how you're doing, you're either at risk of spending more money than you need to on risks that are resolved, or you're missing new emerging risks or risks developing. So what advice would you give to a project manager who really wants to elevate this part of their project management practice?
Well, the first thing to do is ask yourself, how long are you willing to wait before you find out you're late or over budget or it doesn't work?
Yeah.
And then how long can you, or how more rapidly can you find out that you're late? So in our acquisition world, we have a mandatory monthly report. It's called the IPM DAR. You fill out, it's all earned value and it's risk adjusted, all that stuff. So at that nuclear weapons plant we eventually in the last year, we were willing to wait 1 day because the manager of the site was not going to go back to Congress and say, we're late, you gave us $9 billion and we didn't show up on time. I'm not going to do that, right? We need to show up on the day that we said, that's good. But not 1 day after we said we were going to do.
Yeah.
The little joke was when it's all cleaned up and everything's safe, lock the gate and throw the keys over the fence. We're out of here. So that's the thing. So the question is, how long are you willing to wait before you find out you're late? And then put that into your project baseline.
Yeah.
So every week, every 2 weeks, probably not more than a couple of weeks. And this is one of the big advantages of Agile is they have this weekly rhythm or a 2 week rhythm, which they analyze the progress to plan. So as a project manager, do the physical percent complete at half the distance you're willing to wait to find out you're late. Then you can take corrective actions and you're never late.
Yeah.
So you can handle that.
Again, your thinking is very similar to mine, but just in a different context and a different style. So one of the things I always talk about is you need to understand the cadence of your project. If you take a week off and you come back and nothing much has changed, then it doesn't matter if the project team is only monitoring on a weekly basis.
Right.
If you're on one of those projects where popping out for a sandwich at lunchtime and you come back and everything's changed, monitoring on a weekly basis, catastrophe. That monitor and control cycle of find out what the situation is and then control any deviation has to be tuned to the pace of the project. And your example where a day can matter, you've got to be monitoring and controlling on a daily basis. There are projects where you can afford a 2 weekly rhythm, but not many, I would say. We've been through a few things I wanted to talk about. I just wanted to find out whether there's any thoughts you have that haven't come up in this that you'd like to throw into the conversation. Any tips, advice, nuggets of your many years' experience that you want to share?
Well, one of the things is that if we're kind of starting out with people and training them, is that the notion of risk management is misnamed. So it's like saying I can manage in the presence of uncertainty. It's risk handling.
Yeah.
So I have to acknowledge that there are risks that are aleatory, that are outside my control. Deities can deal with them, but not humans. And then the epistemic risk, I can only deal with them when I pay money to buy knowledge. So I have to handle the risks. And that risks all come from root causes. So at the end of the day, the risk manager as a title is actually a root cause analyst.
Yeah.
And the root causes, there's a method, and people can find it by just Googling. It's called the Apollo method. And it's a father and son, and we work in the nuclear weapons business, and they work up at a place in Washington State, Hanford, which is a weapons site. And they came up with the Apollo method that everybody understands that the root cause has two conditions. It has a condition and an action.
Yeah.
So the condition is, for the risk, is that it snowed overnight and I go out to get the paper and the sidewalk is icy, right? The action is I don't have my boots on. Okay. So if I eliminate only one of those, stop the snow, which is a deity, or put my boots on, I will not slip and fall. So find the root causes and then figure out what's the condition of that root cause and what's the action and which one can be eliminated or handled.
Yeah.
And then you are a risk manager.
Yeah, I like that. It's kind of like there's something that there's a triggering incident that you can have the root cause in place for years, and then a triggering incident brings the whole thing down.
Yes.
And I think the other thing that is important about root cause is in my experience, if you go looking for a root cause, you will find one and you will stop looking. Always
Absolutely.
be open to the fact there may be multiple routes that can, or multiple factors that can lead to the same incident or a similar incident. And so I like the idea of focusing on root causes as a risk management activity. I also like the idea of not thinking about risk management, but risk handling. I see your publisher wasn't game for calling the book risk handling. No. But you know, we finally I'm not taking credit for it, but finally PMI is talking about stakeholder engagement rather than stakeholder management.
Yes,
owning up to the fact that we can't really manage our stakeholders, but we can engage with them. Maybe that's a change in language which we will see. And I think you're right. I like risk handling as an approach, as a title for the discipline rather than risk management. It's a good title.
Yeah, and the question is, and we're working on a third book on risk, and with two other colleagues, and Murray Cantor and Christian Smart works at the Missile Defense Agency in Alabama. So and Murray is a mathematician. He was an IBMer. And the idea here is that you not only have to engage with all the people and have all these discussions, but you have to have the underlying mathematical basis for having those conversations.
Yeah.
So you need this risk model. And we don't want to get too deep into the math, but Bayesian statistics is now the basis of all of this.
Yeah.
And there's lots of nice tools and some, Excel plugins, but you have to have some way to understand that there is no singular number. There's no scalar number. When someone says the probability of this occurring is 82%. Well, what's your confidence in that 82%?
Yeah.
No, it's 82%. No, that wasn't my question. What's
and
your
also, this
confidence?
happening is also a misnomer, because what can happen is a range of different outcomes.
Absolutely.
With a range of I think what I'm going to do, I'm not going to ask you to explain Bayesian statistics, because a lot of our audience are not going to need that level of sophistication. Although I think we might come back when you finish that book. But I know you produce a large number of very comprehensive reading lists for people who want to get deep into topics. So I'll put into the description your reading list for risk management, because I know there are some detailed papers in that reading list which will get people into that depth if they're working in or aspire to work in the sort of sectors you've worked in where this level of sophistication is critical.
Yeah. And the key here is that there is no scalar answer. There's no yes or no or 14%.
Yeah.
Everything is probabilistic or stochastic in our universe.
Yeah.
And the idea, when you see a normal curve, people use that all the time.
Yeah.
In our project management world, that's physically impossible.
Yeah.
Because the normal curve can only appear for identical distributions that are independent of each other. So when someone shows, here's my probability curve is happening and it's normal, that cannot be physically true because everything has to be independent and identically distributed. So
when PMI defines a project as a unique endeavor, we immediately should be recognizing that we can't do the kind of statistical analysis that the insurance business can do, because the insurance business has millions of vehicles on the road every day.
Right, and all those samples, and they're all independently distributed, right? Because they're not, the drivers aren't talking to each other to intentionally crash into each other, and they're all identically distributed because they're all on the same road. Yeah. So that works fine. Yeah. But projects don't work that way.
Yeah. This has been brilliant, and I could talk to you for hours, and we have done in the past. What I want to do now is to let people know how they can get hold of your books, how they can read your regular articles and get in touch with you. So what are the best routes?
Well, I would suggest for anybody who's a user of Amazon, they're both on Amazon.
Yeah.
And if you do that, and then both of those are there.
There we go.
And they're now, Jon Quigley brought me to think that we're actually registered authors on Amazon now, not just do the thing, so you can order them there. And on that Amazon account, I think my contact information is there. So as you have mentioned, there's lots of resources that I've collected over the years. I was extremely fortunate to be raised by two, first of all, World War II veterans, combat veterans. So, eat your food, don't complain about anything. No one's trying to kill you. Right. and then the other thing is, my mother, as in her career, she was a reference librarian. Yeah. And so we learned as children, if you want to learn something, go to the library and read a book and or take a class. So both those books then have references in their books to all the other stuff, just like your bookshelves and my bookshelves behind me, is that all this information is there for the reading. And then both you and I have LinkedIn accounts, and on some of my, and now I have I put up a table of contents for all the 4 or 5 years, and there's big reference pages of all the other references, since my mother taught me how to make bibliographies of things. So all this information is there. It's just a matter of finding it and reading it. And then my email is there, and I would encourage anybody who has any questions to send me an email or send me a chat on LinkedIn, and would love to help out or refer you to other resources. Yeah.
And I would definitely encourage anyone who is serious about taking their project management to a higher level. If you want your thinking stretched around a range of project subjects, follow Glen on LinkedIn. I get an email in my inbox pretty much every day. Sometimes at the weekends, it's just a simple quote. Sometimes, usually without comment, but sometimes it's an in-depth article about a very particular part of project management, and it will always make me think. So follow Glen, and definitely buy his books, because if you think you know the basics of project management, this will take you a step further. And if you think you know the basics of risk management, this will take you a step further. Glen, it's been an absolute delight, as always, to speak with you. Thank you very much indeed.
I appreciate the opportunity. It's always great to speak with you too. And one day we'll be face to face, I hope so.
I hope so. Please do give us a thumbs up if you like this video. I'll be creating loads more great project management content. So please subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of it. And I'll look forward to seeing you in the next video.